they just didn't have the proper access. And by the time they figured it out or got organized or the lenders got organized, it was gone. So that's why they set aside a pretty substantial pot of money, hoping that if the bank wasn't interested in helping you, that there was that money available for you to go there. And that's how the Congress dealt with the issue you're raising. I'm not necessarily saying it's adequate. I'm just saying that's what.
No, I know. I was hoping to hear something about that, but along those same lines, since you're talking to the bankers, any thoughts about big banks, Chase, B of A, Wells, versus fintech companies? Fintech seem to do a nice job with trying to help the smaller business owners and getting some of those applications out versus the larger banks. Are the larger banks going to address kind of their,
well, so this is what I would say. The banking lobby in Washington is enormous and has enormous pull. The fintechs don't belong, generally speaking, to that apparatus, right? So the fintechs, I felt like in the last round at least, even though they seemingly did a really good job, just got lost in the noise because they don't have the same presence as the banking community.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Again, not necessarily what you want to hear, but
no, I know it, but that's a challenge, right? Because we have folks that eventually got funded by Wells Fargo, maybe in that second round, but they're really nervous, right? They're like, are we going to wait for Wells to come back around to us, the little guy, or are they just not going to fund us? So does that mean I need to go out and put out another application that's going to get scrutinized, go through underwriting again? These poor business owners, they're just lost again, unfortunately. They're feeling like they're going to get left behind by the big banks.
Right, and that's a legitimate concern. I don't even know that Wells has their forgiveness stuff out. At least somebody I know got one, right? So that's a legitimate concern that they have. But I think that's how Congress thought they were solving it, was by devoting it to, micro lenders and
Thank you.
Speaking of which, I think Toni has her hand raised again, which I think, Toni, I don't know if your question, because this was mine, was would the grant program for the closed venues help the kind of let's call it the mini golf course problem? Because I think that's a good example. Is that what it's for, Ann?
This was really a Chuck Schumer push because he's got Broadway, right? So this is really for the performing arts, the local art, community that can't. I mean, that's how they make money, is by performing in person, and so this is really dedicated to those venues. I'm not sure I know what the mini golf problem is. Have I missed something?
The mini golf problem is the problem that they had to close because of social distancing. They weren't allowed to operate, and so they might have no revenues. And in 2020, which makes them ineligible for the California Rebuilding Fund loan, because you do have to be profitable, have to have some profits,
Well, in this case, you have to get a second loan. You have to show reduced revenues, which I think a mini golf course could very easily show that from 2019. So I'm not sure they face the same problem. In order to get a loan, for a PPP loan, it's not required, I don't think, that you have to be profitable.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't think that this shuttered venues is really for directed toward the arts, but I haven't read the rules.
Yeah, we're still waiting on clarification, what I understand, as far as what the definition of the businesses that will ultimately be eligible. I mean, it includes things like entertainment agents, okay, which kind of frightens me that single entities could go out, right?
CAA.
Right. So, it's only 15 billion. Movie theaters are eligible, right? Do the large movie theaters come in
Yeah.
and gobble up a good percentage of those funds? So
Yeah.
I'm anxious to see how they define it. Truly which businesses are going to be eligible. Is it going to be code based or what? Because it seemed pretty broad based, and then folks had to choose between PPP or shuttered grant. So now we need to go through an analysis period to say, okay, which is going to be better for you, and we don't have the rules yet.
The SBA Inspector General, I think, gave a pretty scathing review of how the funds were spent. I think the committees on the Hill are very aware of problems, and some of that comes from not, as you said, not being defined well enough, and until somebody doesn't get it, and you know what I mean. So, unfortunately, the passing of the torch between the SBA administrator under Trump and the new one, who the nominee is Isabel Guzman, is like right now. So I'd say, in terms of getting further clarification in the next week, to me, doesn't look very likely because of the change of power.
Yeah.
I actually had a slightly different question.
Okay, Toni.
The other, because people, call our office with different issues. Can you talk about when they were discussing moving the eligibility to 501c6s, did they include any discussion about 501? I think it's C16 or 12. It's veteran nonprofit organizations, because that's come up within the context of our state programs. So veteran service centers.
I am not aware of that. The real difference was just the lobbying activity, right? So it's the difference between a C3 is basically not a lobbying entity, and a C6 has some of its activity devoted to lobbying. So like, the chambers of commerce, and, lots of people qualify. So it's really between those two. And I'm not aware that there was an additional C16, I think is what you said.
Yeah, it's 16 or 12. I actually didn't even know they existed until they contacted me.
Yeah. So again, you can look at that, you can look at the guidance and see but I'm just aware of the 3 and 6.
Great. I want to introduce, Mark, are you still here on the call? I think you are.
I am.
Mark's our trusted friend and advisor, knows him well, and I want to see if he has anything that he wants to add to what Ann said, or questions. And we're also interested, the other thing we're interested in is knowing who is going to do PPP. If there's anybody on this call that is going to do PPP for that we can refer people to, because I know and how your staff is feeling and all that. I know that so there's 2 questions that we definitely want to get some answers to if we can. But Mark, you want to chime in first?
Sure. Actually, I have a question for Ann. A lot of the PPP2 is similar eligibility-wise to the first go-around, but it looks like a lot of one of the major changes, and you alluded to it earlier, one of the major changes is you have to demonstrate a 25% loss quarter over quarter. What's your sense of how many folks came in the first go-around that didn't have to demonstrate any losses? We kind of come up with a hybrid between what the first round was, which you just anticipated losses, and what the EIDL loans do, which you have to demonstrate losses. So maybe the question is, how much of a drop off is expected from the folks that really the demonstration of losses is something that will deter them or make it less likely to come in for round 2?
I think the Congress expects that there will be significant change. By the way, I forgot to say, sports organizations don't qualify this time around. And so they tightened some of those things up, you know, in terms of who was eligible. But I think they're anticipating that by putting this need in place, it will get to smaller borrowers and borrowers who need it more.
Okay, and then I guess I've seen that the numbers that I'm not sure is the total number including some of the rolled over money that was not used the first go around, which I understand was about 130 billion and 280 or so 100.
It was, I think it was 256. It's been through too many iterations.
Right. But are they rolling over some of the prior not used money?
Yes, that was the basis for it. Right now it's 284.5 billion, including 35 billion for first-time loans, and that was part of the big pitch when Congress was putting it together. As look, we've already got this authorized, so yes, they rolled that into this amount.
And I guess the other question is that in anticipation of opening up idle loans and idle grants as well, how do those two fit together with this PPP2?
Well, you know, the idle program ran out of money really, really fast the first time around. And the grants were severely limited, to the disappointment of a lot of borrowers. But the underwriting for idle is a lot more stringent than PPP, which was just basically like anybody can apply. And so I think, at least when I see where SBA is putting its resources, they're putting more resources, more personnel into the idle loan, anticipating that they need to ramp that up more than they certainly did the first time. So I think harder to get, but in the end, there is more money for it. The Congress did appropriate more money for it this time around. And the Congress anticipates that more idle loans will be available than were the first time around.
Yeah, that's good. And you alluded to it earlier about we all saw that New York Times article about that PPP couldn't make the distinction for sole proprietors between revenues and payroll. Is that something that has been brought up as a fix that somebody is looking to do?
I think, you know, the folks on the Hill read too, and so did the SBA people. So there's no fix right now that I'm aware of, but I would anticipate that there will be some kind of fix put forward for that because basically of the article.
Yeah, it was that seemed unbelievably bad for the folks that are in that spot. I guess another question is for the smaller loans under 150. I see that the demonstration of loss doesn't need to be done until you come in for forgiveness, right, which puts on the back end, if you will, the eligibility to get the loan to begin with instead of on the front end. I'm curious to see whether lenders see that as something as a concern.
Well, the lenders really pushed for that. I mean, it was the mortgage bankers mostly that really pushed this, and then also companies like Intuit, and you know, so the bankers were firmly behind really pushing for what was put into law, although they initially just said forget about it, just forgive anything under 150.
Right.
And Congress couldn't bring itself to do that, so they ended up with a simplified system.
Good. And I also noticed on the amount for those in the hospitality and restaurant world, the larger, the 3.5 versus 2.5 number there. How do you see the splits, since that's a big share of any of the lending that was done? How do you see the splits being more in that area? Although the 2 million limit is going to limit some of the larger chains to not be able to take the same dollar advantage they did before.
Right. So I think so first of all, the Restaurant Association others were just were clamoring, just saying, you have to give us a better deal or dedicated money or something, because we're hurt absolutely worse than any other segment. And so that's why they got a different, set of instructions or requirements. I think it's congressional intent that small restaurants are really deserving of the relief. I think there was a sufficient blowback by larger restaurant chains taking advantage of it. And I just don't think that you're going to see nearly the amount of, shall I call it abuse or whatever, that you saw in the first round. Everybody's pretty aware that this is supposed to go to smaller restaurants who really need the relief.
Yeah. And I guess one last question, there's so many of the fintech folks that eventually got into PPP lending, and that became a big part of what they were really focusing on. What's your sense of their, if you will, their more continuing involvement in doing SBA lending going forward in the 7A world, if you will?
Well, I haven't followed what their industry group is saying. I mean, they still have one, right? But it was really at the beginning stages when I kind of followed it, right? And maybe it's gotten bigger, but it's kind of David and Goliath. Their voice compared to what the banking industry voice is. So I think, at least at the beginning, they really wanted to become part of the SBA lending, other SBA lending programs. I don't know if that's still on their agenda, but I would say that given their performance on PPP, there'll be much more of a disposal to using them than there was before PPP.
Yeah, and I guess maybe that's the flip side of that question is, what's your sense of SBA's appetite for non-regulated lenders like the fintech folks to be part of the regular SBA guarantee program?
I don't have a good sense of where the Biden folks will come down on that. Typically they have liked non-traditional lenders and CDFIs and like very supportive of that kind of lending. I don't have a clear sense of what they think about other entities, like you just discussed. So I think that's stay tuned.
Okay, and then one last thing, sorry to monopolize here, but one last question. To the question on if you will, the Senate Small Business Committee staff changes, and then what's your sense? Of course, we have the good fortune in California to have a Californian now named as administrator. What's your sense of more generally the appetite from the congressional staff and administration coming in about agendas and priorities?
So I think there's a big letter that I think Cameo signed on to that circulated by the U.S. Chamber asking the Congress to do an expedited hearing to confirm Isabel Guzman. So there's a lot of support in the small business community, and that letter, I am assuming, was generated by somebody or asked for by somebody on the Senate committee, right? So I think I think that they will gladly have her be a part of I think they're going to make it a cabinet position again. The staff, the senior staff, at least as of today, is really staying put in the Senate. In the House, everybody, for the ranking member, everybody had to apply for their jobs. He fired them all and then told them to apply. So there is a shakeup on the Republican side of the House Small Business Committee, but in the Senate side, most of the people that we work with have told us that they are going to continue to remain in place. Mm. And I think, this is how it goes, right? If the Democrats are in power and there's a Democratic president, then they will be very supportive of what the SBA is trying to achieve and will work very closely with them. Maybe not so much for Republicans with a Democratic nominee or, head of the agency. So we'll have to see.
Thanks. And one thing I just want to pick up on that fintech thing, and just just to repeat this many times again, over and over, is, if fintechs are going to have their loans guaranteed by the federal government, they better be, let's say, responsible lenders. I don't, and not, I think a lot of lenders use the PPP, at least the first round, as kind of a lead generating system, even though before they even had been approved as lenders, they took interest forms. So they got tons of people's emails, and it was a lead generating mechanism for them. And so everybody on this call, I just want to say it once again, make sure that your borrowers help them understand those loans and that money that they might be getting from an online lender. All of them are not bad. There are good ones out there. But just make sure that their loans, they understand what loan they're doing. And I would say that part of an advocacy thing that we would ask is that, the guarantees not be, you can do a guarantee with this hand, and do a good loan with this hand, and do a bad loan with the other hand. So I have two hands. So we would just want to make sure that's on the table, I think, especially for our group, these people, the people that we care about and the businesses that we represent on this call. So there is a question in the chat. Jimena, I'm finally getting to your question about forgiveness, about the new process for filing for forgiveness for the first PPP loan. They should go back to their lender. Is that right? Ann? They should go back to their lender and find out what the process is. It's going to be a simple one-page form if it's under 150,000. And they should work with their lender on that. And if you need to help them, you can help them. Do we have let's see, I think I saw posted the forgiveness guidelines. Yes. Thank you. I think that was Toni that posted that. Thank you, Toni. There's forgiveness instructions, the form instructions, and the provisions.
New forms are being built. That's all. So we're just kind of waiting on the new forms to be finished.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have the law in front of me, but there was a pretty short period of time that they gave the SBA to generate that form. So it shouldn't take very much longer.
There's a link in chat that seems come from the SBA. I don't know if that's a new document or the old document. Let's see. It is effective December 31st. So that you should be able to download some documents. Those are in the chat. So if I will post all of these again, and I'll make sure that we get in a follow-up email. Should business owners go back to the first lender for their second PPP loan? And that's a really good question. I think what I've been hearing anecdotally from our members is that they're going to be helping their existing borrowers. So if you did get a PPP loan from in the alternative space, they should go back and make sure to start there. And I mentioned a little bit earlier, do we have any lenders on the call who are going to be doing PPP? If you want to either raise your hand or say something or talk about what you guys are doing or what you might be doing. Looking to see if anybody's hand is raised.
again, the call I was just on, it was brought up, and a large portion of our members who did the PPP loans in the first round are definitely going to start with and may only lend to the ones they, in the second round, to the people they did in the first round.
Yeah.
So,
So we are looking for resources and places to send people who want a first round PPP. I know people are strapped here in California as far as capacity. We have, if, we're hoping, I know they're strapped by capacity and also strapped by capital. So I know that there are some lenders, and when we find out who they are, we will be making sure that you guys have that information. Craig
That's the
posted it.
latest. Yeah, that's the latest from LA Orange County District SBA office, a list that they've compiled on lenders that are willing to take new applicants.
Mhm.
So sorry, it's a JPEG. I just had to grab it from Ron today.
Sure.
So
We're
trying to get the work
yeah,
compiled.
I was thinking more the Cameo members and the CDFIs they're open to today.
Take a look at that list and see who's on there.
Yeah.
And pair them up to see which ones.
So I'll make sure
There aren't many, unfortunately, that
Yeah.
are really looking at new applicants. It's a short list.
Yep. I've heard that from several people
It's just they have PPP on their portfolio already, right? They're going to
Mhm.
service their customers,
Yep.
and there's not enough funds.
Yep.
It's the way it is.
B has a question, and let's see. SBA's interim final rule defines receipts as including cost of goods sold. Generally, receipts are considered total income in the case of a sole proprietor, independent contractor, or self-employed individual's gross income plus cost of goods. B, do you want to was there anything in the legislation that directed receipts to include cost of goods sold? Usually cost of goods sold is an expense. That's interesting. Okay, so since PP2 requires a 25% drop in receipts, it seems like a definition that may get changed in the future unless it's in legislation for some reason. So it's the definition of cost of goods sold, And Ann?
I looked in the legislation and I read through it. I can't see a definition in there, but sometimes the notes to it.
Yeah, I would be surprised if it was. It would be more likely to be defined by Treasury or SBA. And if you didn't see it in all those documents, then.
Yeah, what concerns me is I know that they make corrections after the fact, but this is such a key eligibility. It is so, and Mark can chime in, it is so counterintuitive to include cost of goods sold into receipts because it's an expense. And I have gone, I'm looking everywhere. The only other thing, Ann, is, sometimes the notes to the legislation, right, the clarifying notes that we don't usually get access to will sometimes have their intent. So I was thinking, are they trying to help by increasing? I just couldn't figure it out. And I think I read it as carefully as I could. Somebody's commenting in here. Maybe somebody has an answer to this. Because I can't, and I'm.
I'd have to look into it because this is not something anybody's raised with me. And I certainly don't remember what exactly, what was in the legislation well enough to, it like that.
Let me point you to the page of the interim final rule, so you won't have to dig it out. It's on page 8 of the PPP2 interim final. It is in the footnotes. It's also within the text, but the footnotes cites a subsection. I did try to go, I kind of scooted around the bill to try and see it, but it also speaks about, what isn't included and what is. But the key for me is that the thing called plus cost of goods sold. That's what I kept looking at it thinking I must be reading it wrong. But that I just gave you exactly what it said.
Thank you. Yeah. I will remind you that this bill was thrown together right before Christmas. So I would be really surprised if there were congressional notes to go with it.
Okay. Well,
Is-
and it could be, I don't know. Again, they may have a reason at SBA why they're adding cost of goods sold.
Yeah,
into that.
yeah.
I just don't. Okay. Again, the only reason I bring it up, it's a nitpicky point for many businesses, but for some, it's going to be a deal killer
Right.
potentially in qualifications. Okay, thank
Exactly.
you.
Thank
So
you.
is that something that we can just bring to people's attention? Like, or is the final rule the final rule?
Well, they're taking comments, right? If it's an interim final.
Okay.
So it'd be worth posing the question. But
Okay. We can,
SBA is the one I think that I'd start with asking them about that. And you have a district person, right, that's been on these calls? I guess I would start with them.
okay. We can put it to the district. I see some people have unmuted. I don't know, and maybe come off. Natalie, do you have a question? You came off it. You came onto video, so I'm wondering if you
Yeah,
have a
hi
question.
Heidi, and hello everyone. I'm actually a community relations consultant with Wells Fargo, and I know that there was a couple inquiries. So, Heidi, I think I have an outdated version of Zoom, but I did put in the email to you a link to Wells Fargo's site that will be having updated information about our approach to PPP. So
Great.
that would
I
be
can
a
pop
great
that.
resource page.
Great. I can pop that into let's see. Natalie, there we go.
Okay, and that's all. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Natalie. Is there anybody else who has there is one other question about or where to find this information, going over when the applicant needs to decide on the 8-week or 24-week covered period at the time of application or at the time of forgiveness. Do we have an answer to that question, or would we find it in the guidance?
You'd find it in the guidance.
We'd find it in the guidance. Okay, so we'll try.
Yeah, it's 8 to 24 weeks. So they changed the language there. It's not an either or anymore. It's whenever you spend the funds. So
Okay.
if it's 14 weeks and they're all gone, then that would then be your coverage period. But they eliminated the alternative payroll period now, kind of in response to that. So they've just made some updates.
Okay, so they don't have to decide, is what you're
They do not,
They
no.
just have to spend between that period of
The
time.
minimum of 8.
Yep.
So it's a minimum of 8 to 24. So they don't have to decide. They just work through their use of funds in essence and earmark it appropriately. Yeah.
Great. Excellent. Okay, well, do we have more questions? Are you all seeing with your clients the desire for PPP? What are you hearing? Are you hearing, oh, I want to go find my PPP, or is it mostly about forgiveness? Or, we'd love to get a pulse of to what you're hearing from your business owners, or has it, again, hasn't been all consuming with the grant? I know this week has been particularly tough because the grant did take up a lot of room in people's schedules. Crickets, anyone? I'm going to assume then the grant took up everybody's headspace. I want to, yes, desire for PPP. So we are and I'll asking about forgiveness. Yeah, the forgiveness is Congress's way of giving a grant, right? I mean, it's they can.
Right. So Congress didn't want to give grants.
Right.
So instead they gave loans that could be forgiven. Okay.
Right. So,
It
exactly.
also, I think the other thing that, while the mechanism is time consuming to do it that way, it is a fairly straightforward way for government to get the information that members want to know. And so there's, I mean, you can do a little more finer targeting on it. And after you guys have a chance to think about your experience with doing a straight grant, you might want to think about, you know, what are the advantages of that relative to having loan programs that you're operating. And as we go out for reauthorizations for California, because the governor has quite a lot of money on the table, maybe you might have some really good thoughts about, is it grants or is it forgiveness? Or can we blend it?
Right. Good point, Toni. Great. Well, I know this has been a crazy week for everyone. Thank you for all your hard work that you put in and that you give to our small businesses. That you're doing really great work and should feel really good about the work that you're doing and proud of the work that you're doing. You know, we're grateful for you all and for your participation and for the work that you're doing. I know your small business owners are too. And thank you so much as always for sharing your expertise and your insight, especially on Capitol Hill. It was pretty interesting and important that we understand the perspective there. So thank you. Mark, as always, thanks to you for coming on and the Cameo staff. I think we've got Susan and Carolina. And if everybody hasn't met Mega, I don't know if she's still on the call, but Mega is working with us. She's a new, I think she had to go. She's a new addition. So you might hear or get an email from a person named Mega Jewel. So you should be on the lookout for that. Jimena, I see your note about other sources in the other language. I'll make, you know, and got it. And everybody have 11 minutes back in your Wednesday. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.